All right, is Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, are they ordinary? Is anybody going to win the NFC South? That and a whole lot more as Nick and I have our top 10 takeaways from week 7. Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by No House Advantage. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. We had a very interesting week 7. Potential for better games than we had. Seemed like we're going to get a few more high-scoring games. We did get them in the afternoon window. Only one such game in the morning, or for me, morning. For you, early afternoon window. Nick, what's going on? How was your week 7?
Well, the Jaguars had an extremely Jaguars loss to the New York Giants. So for like the 4th week in a row, I'm coming out pretty disappointed. It was one that you could just see a mile away as soon as Travis Etienne, fumbled essentially on the goal line into the end zone. Nobody beats themselves like the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm still kind of smarting from that loss, but overall, just another day of completely chaotic football, right? I mean, you think no way can the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose this game outright to the Carolina Panthers and somehow end up scoring 3 points on the road against PJ Walker just days after the Panthers trade their franchise player in Christian McCaffrey. I think that now officially supplants last week's loss as the single most surprising takedown of the entire season. Green Bay continues to be in a spiral. I know you mentioned it, Brady and Rodgers in the intro. I don't know if they're cooked necessarily, because it's interesting because, Rodgers especially will just look horrific for 3 straight drives, and then he'll roll out and, whip a ball 45 yards downfield for a first down. And you think, okay, you still got it in there. But I don't know if those quarterbacks are done, but I think both of those teams just look completely out of sorts and completely cooked to me.
Yeah, the teams are ordinary. Maybe the quarterbacks are not able to transcend their issues right now. They're not making Romeo dubs, for instance. There. Let's just jump into that Packers game first. Packers Commanders. First half, I mean, the Packers are in control. It's 14-3. They had the defensive touchdown. Aaron Jones got in. We saw Taylor Heinicke look like Tyler Heinicke, from last year, where he made some baffling plays, including against the Packers last year. If you recall last year, Heinicke against the Packers was one of those where he became a meme. He became the guy that we were all kind of mocking. And he was that for a half. There was, search, timelines for Sam Howell comments there. You'll see them. They're out there. I might have made one. But I really think that part still might not be great for Washington. But let's stay on the Packers side first, because this offense, they weren't able to run the ball at all. 12 carries, 38 yards. The fact that AJ had only got 4 carries to begin with there shows how little they're committed to running the ball.
Yep.
Their offensive line's kind of not great right now, too. They get a lot of problems right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just the box score, you'll see Aaron Rodgers did not take a sack. So it wasn't nearly as disastrous as last week, where it felt like he was being hit left and right by that Jets defensive line. But, Rodgers was making a point to get the ball out early. That's been something that has kind of plagued him all season. Like, on paper, that sounds like a good thing, right? It's like you're getting the ball out right away. You're not taking sacks. But, there's no big play potential whatsoever with this Green Bay offense. And part of it is, I think Rodgers, whether the offensive line is good on a given day or not, I think he still in the back of his mind doesn't trust that offensive line. And it leads to a lot of quick throws. It leads to, it's 2nd and 9 and you're doing a quick swing pass to Robert Tonyan. Okay. Yeah. You catch it for 2 yards, but now you're facing a 3rd and long. And this is a team that did not convert a single 3rd down all day against the Washington Commanders. And, yet again, for the 3rd straight week, it felt like it was a game that the Packers got off to a pretty good start. They were in control. They were leading 14-3. They had a pick 6. And then, they allow this long touchdown drive. And even after that, it looks like they're about to get a fumble 6. That's called back on a very questionable defensive holding call on Eric Stokes. And it felt like Green Bay, I think they thought they had won the game, when they got that defensive touchdown. All of a sudden it's called back. And, they don't even end up allowing a score on the drive. Washington misses a field goal. But that really, to me, felt like the inflection point of the game, where Green Bay, it wasn't the type of punches that they've taken in recent weeks, but it felt like, there was kind of the emotional high of thinking you have that defensive touchdown, getting it taken off the board. And then after that, the defense just kind of lost its juice the rest of the afternoon, and it was a slow bleed out. I saw the same thing that you did about Heinicke. There were a lot of calls early on, a couple early punts, early 3-and-outs for Washington. There was a lot of like, can Sam Howell really be worse than this? But Taylor Heinicke outplayed Aaron Rodgers on balance in this game. He was willing to make the big throws. He had a couple huge ones to Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, I think, was the most important offensive player in this entire game. He had 3 plays where he beat Jair Alexander one-on-one. Alexander had an awful afternoon. After the game, he's still saying, well, I know I'm the best. It doesn't really matter. Jair Alexander almost single-handedly cost the Packers this game. It was another rough one.
Yeah, it's a weird flex after you get beat like that. But and there was one instance there was that, and the Packers are desperately trying to get the ball back, and McLaurin just beat Alexander the ball. He had the want more to get that first down, and that kept them on the field a little bit longer. Just bad. It was bad timing for that, but it was interesting to see that Heinicke unlocked McLaurin, unlike Carson Wentz earlier this year. This is the first game where they made McLaurin kind of a priority.
Right. And I kind of joked with some friends this week that like, hey, I'm a little more scared of this Commanders team with Taylor Heinicke than I am with Carson Wentz. And I think we've seen that now a few times around the league. I think you could say the same thing this past week about PJ Walker versus Baker Mayfield. It's like, yeah, on paper, maybe they're not really any better. And, with Walker, there might be a lower floor, but just sometimes mixing it up and having, stalling essentially for 6 straight weeks with Carson Wentz and just having somebody who's willing to throw it up there. Yeah, Taylor Heinicke might throw a pick or two. The Packers had a couple dropped interceptions in this game, but at least he's just willing to throw it up there and let his receivers make plays. And that's exactly what Terry McLaurin did. Yeah,
exactly. I don't think they're better off with Heinicke in the long run. I think the mistakes will kind of take root. I mean, we saw it last year. He gets exposed.
Exactly. That's the thing with Heinicke is like he's there's not that like what if potential because we saw it for most of last season. Like it is what it is.
Yeah. We also saw Antonio Gibson get unlocked a little bit too. Like, oh yes, we have this player who's actually really good. Maybe we should give him some touches. He got 13 touches, 10 carries, 5.9 yards per carry, a lot more than the Brian Robinson cloud of dust work there. And then 3 catches, including the touchdown. More of that. Definitely. He is a playmaker. He needs to be out there. He needs to be involved in this offense. And we saw that there. Robinson was 20 for 73. He had one 24-yard run, but I mean, he was mostly just kind of grinding. It was 3 yards every time. He's fine. He's just, I think Gibson's got a side to him that Robinson just doesn't have.
Yeah, you've been on this corner for a while, and you're right. He certainly passed the eye test more than Robinson did in this game. The snap count was almost even. Robinson 35, Gibson 29. Gibson, of course, a little more involved in the passing game and those type of situations. But both guys, I think, did a great job kind of grinding down that Packers defense, especially Robinson late in the game. And that's been the story for this defense. I think they've had a lot of hot starts, and then when they need to get off the field, they cannot get off the field. They allowed a 16-play drive that took up, almost the entire third quarter in this game. All of a sudden, it's a game where Green Bay needs to score, and all of a sudden there's like 10 minutes left in the game, and you're like, where did all the time go? Well, it was when you allowed Washington to convert like 5 straight third downs and not get off the field. And then right after that, a 9-play drive, and then Washington ends up icing the game with an 8-play drive. So just the inability to force, it doesn't even have to be a 3-and-out, but this defense can't even force 5-and-out, 6-and-out, 7-and-outs in the second half. So I think Green Bay is done officially as a contender. Maybe they find a way to sneak in as a wild card just because of the overall weakness of the NFC. But I don't think there's any trade or acquisition that can really salvage anything here.
Not DJ Moore.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think this team has bigger issues. We'll see. I mean, maybe I don't know, because like, do you think if you like replace Devontae Adams, you put him back on this roster, are all their problems solved? I don't know. They seem like a team that has more than just we need a talented receiver. I think that like I almost have more questions about the defense and how they haven't been able to lean on that, because you see a team like Denver. I mean, Denver's struggling just as much, if not more, on offense, but the defense is still playing well, still keeping them in games. Yeah. And I thought Green Bay's defense would be close to that level. I really did this year. And I think it's just kind of the fact that they seem to come and go with the offense to me is really concerning.
Well, I think part of it is they're just on the field a lot more. 47 plays by the Packers, 72 by the Commanders. Some of that is in the Commanders converting those third downs and the Packers not. The Packers ran it 12 times.
Yep.
I mean, just
crazy.
12.
How many times are we going to go through this? We talked about it the last 3 weeks. We've had this exact same conversation where Matt LaFleur goes to the podium and says, look, we got to get our best playmakers the ball.
Yeah.
They just don't do it. They don't commit to it. And this wasn't a game where they were trailing for a decent amount of the second half, but it wasn't like you're down 3 touchdowns and you just can't run because you're so worried about time. Like there's still the play calling completely belies, the comments from Rodgers and the coaching staff every week.
9 for 69 in penalties too. And that might've had something to do with it also.
Yeah. Some really, really bad ones. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, at least Jones got there in the passing game. He had 9 catches, 10 targets, 53 yards, of course, the 2 touchdowns. He is their playmaker. You could see Rodgers getting ticked off at Dubs at one point. Goes, oh yeah, what the F are you doing? I think you ran the wrong route. Only 4 targets for Dubs and didn't catch any of them. They had Sammy Watkins back. Yay. Alan Lazard got banged up in this one, came back, but he didn't get a target after he came back. So something to watch for in practice this week. He's been on the injury list almost every single week too.
Yep. Yeah. You mentioned Dubs 0 for 4 on those targets. 2 of them were drops. One of them was a really bad drop on a 4th and 1 that they absolutely needed in the 4th quarter. And, it wasn't the easiest catch in the world, but it was a very, very catchable ball that a good receiver, it's a play that they make. And then he didn't. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's one that's just, you knew that we were going to get that shot from the Fox crew of Rodgers.
Oh, yeah.
Unstrapping the chin strap, shaking his head, mouthing something. And of course we got it.
Yep. Of course.
Yep.
So, yeah. And then, so we talked about one aging quarterback struggling. Let's go back. We'll dig into this Panthers and Buccaneers game. I did not see the Bucs getting shut out until the 4th quarter in this one. I did not. I mean, they got in the red zone once all day.
Crazy.
Punt. Tom Brady threw it 49 times, 5.9 yards per attempt. This is a team that couldn't run the ball. Fournette, 8 for 19 against Carolina. I did not. Another thing, I was like, wow. And then meanwhile, Carolina ran all over the Bucs. I really didn't see that coming, but I think it's true. The Bucs are not what we think they are in terms of like a run defense. And this has been, and this isn't the first time this has happened this year. But for Carolina to be able to do that with Deonta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard really speaks volumes.
Yeah, this was an all-time letdown spot for sure. I think they're the first team since I want to say it was the Steelers in like 08 or 09 to lose back-to-back games as a double-digit favorite. I mean, it's literally something that happens like once every 10 to 15 years.
Right.
So, I mean, they're in full-on panic mode. I think as bad as the Packers look, Tampa Bay has been maybe worse, just in terms of the lack of scoring. And I think they have significantly better talent at receiver, certainly, than Green Bay does. So I think that makes it a bit more concerning. The one thing you could fall back on if you're Tampa Bay is you're somehow still in first place in your division. They're going to win the NFC South. I don't see this going, so far that they end up, ceding that to Atlanta or New Orleans. So they're still in a good spot, I think, long-term. They have a much longer runway than Green Bay as far as being able to figure this thing out. But it's very similar to the Packers where you watch and you say, like, I don't really – it's not just one thing. Everything seems broken. The talent is there. You got, like, Mike Evans dropping what would have been like a 75-yard touchdown on the first series of the game. That to me, it felt like, if he makes that catch and walks in and they're up 7-0, I think this game goes completely differently. But I think that kind of – cast a pall over that entire offense, and they were just never able to bounce back from that. I mean, how can we be 7 weeks into the year and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have scored more than 21 points one time all year? And it was in a loss to the Chiefs where, they were just hucking the ball around because they were down big. I mean, this offense is in complete shambles right now. And much like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady's getting the ball out quick. He's not getting sacked, but they're not productive throws. Just, he's kind of throwing it just to throw it. And it really doesn't seem like they come into these games with a plan.
No, the one sack that he took yesterday was a big one.
Yeah.
But yeah, 14-yarder and just the timing, putting him out of field goal position, not even close actually. That was a crusher. And both Green Bay and Tampa, it gets harder this week. Green Bay has to go to Buffalo.
Yep.
I think that's the Sunday night game. Tampa is hosting the Thursday night game against Baltimore. No time to turn this around. I mean, this is really tough spot for both teams.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, as of right now, has never been a double-digit dog in his career. They are a double-digit dog in that game. I mean, hard to imagine that Green Bay finds a way to do anything against Buffalo. Although, you could say the same thing. That's what we thought about Carolina against Tampa Bay. So maybe the way that this season has gone, Green Bay is going to go in and win at Buffalo. But I mean, they're in a position to just get absolutely smacked, right? I mean, there's a world in which that game is like 41-3 Buffalo, and that's the official death knell for this Packers season. I mean, I don't know how you could have any faith in Green Bay getting it turned around. They just emerged from their easiest part of their schedule, right? I mean, you got the Bailey Zappi Patriots, the Giants, the Jets, and the Commanders in 4 straight weeks, and you come out of that stretch 1-3 with the only win being escaping by the skin of your teeth at home in overtime against the Pats' third quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, this is as bad as it could possibly be, I think, for Green Bay. I was talking with some Packers friends about, like, is LaFleur's job potentially in danger? Like, it's gotten that bad. I don't think it really is, but the product is so horrendous that you almost have to wonder if there's like some sort of house cleaning needs to be done. And I don't think we see that in Tampa Bay. Like I said, I think they have enough of a grip on that division, which is just so bad that they'll end up kind of, limping their way to a playoff spot. But yeah, man, I mean, 28 targets for Evans and Godwin for like 135 yards, just crazy numbers week to week for this Buccaneers offense.
Right. It is. It's really crazy. I think that the Saints could still give them a challenge, but the fact that they went in and beat the Saints, I mean, that helps for their sake. But, Carolina's won 2 home games in the division now. I think on the Carolina side, it reinforces the lesson we have to learn every year. Players do not punt. Coaches do not punt.
Exactly.
They don't tank, I should say. Front offices tank, but players do not. Coaches do not. They're all playing for their next job, their next paycheck, or to be, they have pride. It's not even that. It's just, you can't go halfway. They're going to play. They play. Deonta Foreman was just awesome yesterday. He had the 60-yard run, but even if you take that away, he still was running really well. Chuba Hubbard looked good even. Chuba Hubbard never looks good. It's almost like there's this big weight off their shoulders in a way. Like, okay, well, we don't have Matt Rule holding us down. We don't have to look over our shoulder for McCaffrey to save us. This is us doing it. I don't know. I don't think they're better off without him, but at the same time, these guys know they have the job and they took advantage of it there. Even DJ Moore. There's hope for DJ Moore. Yay.
Yeah, that might be the most unlikely thing about this entire game is not the Panthers winning by 18 as double-digit dogs, but DJ Moore, 7 for 69 and a touchdown. He looked fantastic in this game, had a couple of really high degree of difficulty catches, including that touchdown. PJ Walker was dealing, man. If you just kind of did a blind resume and said, which of these guys is the best quarterback of all time in this game, you'd be like, obviously it's PJ Walker. He was throwing dime after dime after dime in this game, looked way more confident than he did against the Rams when they just came out with such a limited game plan. So, I mean, Tampa certainly in trouble after this, but interested to see what Carolina does now, showing some friskiness. They're at Atlanta next week. I think 2 teams that, in terms of overall talent, really aren't all that different. I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina, I think they're probably in the driver's seat to finish with the worst record in the league at this point or be in that conversation. But I think they're kind of buying in on what this team can be, post McCaffrey.
Yeah. PJ Walker, I think they made it pretty clear he's earned another start.
Yeah.
He was 16 of 22. They didn't turn the ball over. That's the thing. They gave no short fields to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay had to earn it, and they couldn't earn it. It's just remarkable. The defense just roared up there. And the defense has had their other moments this season. The defense won that game against the Saints. Remember, they had the defensive touchdown on that one. They caused all sorts of problems for the Rams the week before. It's just the offense has been so pathetic and having all these bad turnovers and creating these short fields. That was the big problem for the defense. The defense has been fine all year. But the offense, it's been something pretty ugly there. But Walker will get another start, and it's a good start. It was earlier in the year. It was, you didn't want to face the Atlanta pass defense, but Casey Hayward's on the IR. AJ Terrell got hurt yesterday. They're hurting in the secondary right now. We'll talk more about Atlanta in a second. Anything else from Tampa Bay, Carolina before we move on?
No, not too much. I mean, you said it with the defense. Big time bend but not break effort by the Panthers defense. The Buccaneers, this has really been something that's plagued them all years. They drive deep into opponent territory, and this happened 3 or 4 times in the second half of this game where you kept thinking, all right, if they can get a touchdown on the board, they could make this interesting. And routinely they would get all the way down to like the Carolina 20, 25-yard line and just couldn't convert third and shorts over and over and over. They went out on downs a couple times. They settled for a field goal late in the game, which at that point, I think they should have just gone for it. But yeah, the Carolina defense, like you said, I think they've kind of been lumped into this disaster of a season, but they've been pretty good.
Yeah, 100%. All right. This podcast and all of our football podcasts this season are brought to you by No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play in pick'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit on all of your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. You can sign up now with promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com, or download the app on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. We are breaking down week 7 here. Nick Whalen, Jeff Erickson here. We're looking at everything that happened. Let's talk happy places here. I teased it a little bit talking about Atlanta. Bengals rolled at home against the Falcons yesterday, and it started right away. 4 plays in, they're up 7-0 already. Tyler Boyd hit the big play. And the big key of this game is that Joe Burrow just was hardly touched early on, and he just converted and converted and converted again. They lost A.J. Terrell. They had already lost Casey Hayward. That secondary was all exposed, and Burrow time and again found guys open. It was pitch and catch for a lot of this game.
Yeah, it really was. And my 2 biggest regrets of the week in fantasy were I grabbed Deontay Foreman like a week or 2 ago in pretty much every league. Didn't start him anywhere. Didn't feel quite good about that matchup. And I also have Tyler Boyd in a lot of leagues, and I think I only started him in 1. So left a lot of points on the table there. I mean, he had essentially like a 30-point day in PPR formats. He was fantastic. 8 for 155. Jamar Chase, back-to-back big weeks. Kind of starting to feel like last year, where when he picks up steam, it would feel like he'd rip off 3 or 4 of those big games in a row. So you love to see that if you're the Bengals. And I mean, we were on Joe Burrow potentially breaking the single game passing record watch for parts of this game. I mean, he was well over
like 300 at halftime.
Yeah. I mean, it was unbelievable. Some of the big plays that this offense was ripping off. And I mean, credit to Atlanta for finding a way. I think they got a field goal just before halftime. Like it wasn't completely lopsided. It was only 11-point game at halftime, and it felt like the Bengals were scoring at will at that point. But credit to Cincinnati for tacking on another touchdown in the third quarter and then just kind of running things out in the fourth. This is a Cincinnati offense I thought we would see earlier on.
Yeah.
And it's taken almost halfway into the season, but these are the type of games that we saw from Cincinnati down the stretch last year into the postseason. I hope this is who they could be going forward. They're like one of the 3 offenses, I think, week to week that nobody wants to see. Kansas City's on that list. Buffalo is on that list, and probably Philly as well. So maybe there are 4, but I mean, This team is as explosive as any when they get it rolling.
Yeah, they are. They really are. And it was rolling yesterday. They almost had, at one point, they had 3 players over 100 yards receiving. Higgins had a catch late that was turned over, was ruled out of he had a little slight juggle. Otherwise, he would have been over 100 yards. Would have had all 3 receivers over 100 yards. Chase limped off at one point because he was dealing with a hip issue during the week. He was taken off the injury list by Friday. Watch for that. Now, keep in mind, they don't play until Monday, so we won't know until Thursday's practice to see what happens with that. That'll be their first practice this week. If you're trying to find a negative, if you're trying to pick nits, it's the fact that Joe Mixon still isn't getting unlocked. Longest run was 11 yards, 17 for 58. They go to him on first down a lot, and it's always
very predictable.
Into the pile. It's like, just don't even bother. I mean, it's just, I understand you got to have some balance in life. You got to do that a little bit, but it makes play action work, for instance, a lot better. But yeah, it's just not working. It's just not clicking.
And this is a bad Falcons defense. I mean, they're by some metrics the worst defense in the league. They're bottom 5, especially against the pass. They're terrible, but they're they're 27th against the run, even factoring in this past game. So yeah, that's concerning. I mean, it feels like Joe Mixon has like these 17 for 58 games every single week, and we keep saying, well, it's good that the volume is there. Unlike the Packers, they're not going away from him. They are force feeding him, but yeah, it's starting to feel really redundant and really predictable. And I don't have nearly as much faith that that's going to click and come around at some point in the season as we did with this passing game. And I think we kind of saw at some points they're like, all right, we're just going to we're going to just have Joe Burrow drop back and air it out. Like we're committed to trying to establish the run. But I thought early in this game, they got away from that. They went back to Joe Mixon very heavily on that last drive. I mean, they put together a 17 play, almost 9-minute drive to run out the clock in this game. Didn't even end up scoring on that drive. So that was kind of a big part of why the scoring slowed down. I mean, they ate up almost the entire fourth quarter, just kind of trying to run things out. But at halftime, this had the feel of a game that it's like Cincinnati could score as many points as it wants.
Yeah. It was right before the end of the second half. Second quarter. That's when Chase limped off and they punted that one time. Had the big punt return that led to that last field goal. But even that was after they hit, and they had one big play to Damiere Byrd for 75 yards. By the way, he got that one target. That's all they got. On the Atlanta side, a lot of yelling and screaming on Twitter yesterday about this. Marcus Mariota threw the ball 13 times. He got sacked 3 times, so that's part of it there. And other times he had to scramble. They didn't count as sacks. He ran the ball 6 times. But I mean, they were down 21-0, and they ground out this long drive. Now, the fact I actually didn't have a problem with that because they got a scoring touchdown drive. I mean, it took a long time, but that got them to 21-7. You're like, okay. And then the Bengals went boom, right back, 28-7. And after that, there was no sense of urgency from Atlanta. They just they couldn't do it. And part of this is give credit to the Bengals defense. They haven't allowed a second half touchdown all season long. So in the third quarter in particular, they're very stingy, and it's been working really well. So that has something to do with it there. But Drake London had 1 target, Nick. 1. That's inexcusable.
It's inexcusable, but it's also the Atlanta Falcons. They've kind of been doing this with Kyle Pitts as well, and now it feels like Drake London is heading down that same path. I mean, we're a few weeks removed from Drake London looking like maybe the best of all these rookie receivers. He was the favorite to take home Offensive Rookie of the Year for a while, and that's fallen off these last few weeks. And Atlanta remains, like you said, they're committed to this kind of ground game. They don't like airing it out, even in a game where they're trailing big. We didn't really see Atlanta get too aggressive. 13 pass attempts for Marcus Mariota in this game. They were still content to pound Tyler Algier, who went 16 for 50, did have a touchdown, didn't really matter in this game. But yeah, I mean, Atlanta, so frustrating. I mean, it's hard to lump them in the same basket as like the Panthers and the Bears because they haven't been that bad. But in terms of fantasy frustration and like the amount of talent that they're just kind of leaving out there with London and Pitts, I mean, it's maddening. I mean, the Pitts situation is just horrendous. 3 catches, 9 yards this week.
Now, he was targeted on another play in the end zone where the Bengals actually got called for pass interference. There's another play he caught right at the goal line. Had he not had a little bit of a juggle, he would have been ruled in for a touchdown. Instead, he was down at like the 1-yard line. They pounded it in after that. Algier got the touchdown instead. But that just shows, I mean, like they are looking for him in the red zone at least. I felt like there's something positive from that experience. They're home against Carolina this week. So early in the year, I was arguing that Atlanta was more talented than Carolina. They might still be, but it's not as certain anymore. And you take away the 2 corners, and that just completely changes this Atlanta defense, especially if you're not getting enough pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, they don't pressure the quarterback, and like you said, the corners that are losing those guys, I think, is what's helped plunge them toward the bottom of the league in terms of EPA and DVOA and things like that on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, Atlanta 6-point favorites in this game at home. I get it. I think there's kind of like the opposite bounce back effect for the Panthers after you pull off a win like that last week, but 6 points. I don't know that there's that big of a difference with these teams right now.
I think this is like the Spider-Man gif. I think they're the same team.
I think they're close.
And in fact, I haven't done guess the lines for everything yet. So, but at the same time, like I did not expect that. Like, wow, I would have said 2.5, 3. I think these are basically even teams. I don't know. Maybe that, but this strikes me as a what does Vegas know that I don't know sort of thing.
Exactly.
They usually know, which the answer is always a lot more than I realize. So there you go. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Let's go with. Well, we haven't talked the Thursday night game. I didn't get to do the show with you on Thursday night. So let's briefly cover that. Andy Dalton threw for 6 touchdowns, 4 of them to his own team. But that was the big story. Were those 2 pick sixes basically? Otherwise, this was basically an even game.
Yeah, it was an even game, and it was one where I think the Saints came out and looked like they were going to set the tone, right? I mean, they marched right down, score in like 5 plays on their first drive. They hold Arizona to a field goal. They marched all the way down again, put together this really impressive, like 14-play drive. You're right on the brink, and then Andy Dalton throws a pick in the end zone. That was egregious. But even after that, they hold Arizona to another field goal. They go down, score again. You're up 14-6, and you're thinking, man, we should be up 21-6 right now. And then, like you said, the back-to-back pick sixes, and this ended up being a 1-score game. But it to me, it felt like it was over after that second pick six.
Yep. And the first one wasn't his fault, by the way. That first one went off of Callaway's hands.
Yep.
Maybe he forced it a little bit in the traffic, but the fact is he got it there. Callaway just biffed it there. So I blame Callaway on that. But the second one was just egregious. The Simmons touchdown, pick six. That was horrible. And they didn't recover. And also Arizona got through that third quarter late. There was the fire drill at the end of the game where they scored 17 points in the fourth quarter. Kept on trying to get those onside kicks. They'll struggle with that. But the fact is, if you're trying to if you need 2 recovered onside kicks to win a game, chances are you weren't as close as the score it suggests there. But some positives are that, I mean, they did move the ball, especially early on. They were rolling. They found Olave a lot. Kevin White
getting into the action.
Yeah,
out of nowhere.
Back on the practice squad now, but by rule. It's not like they had a choice. If you call someone up for the practice squad, by rule, they revert to it after the game. Traquan Smith was just okay. Remember, he got into that little step on a player fighting on the sidelines and all that. Oh, yeah. Fun times. They didn't really get Kamara unlocked too much. He had one good run, and he did get involved in the passing game. That's one thing. Dalton will throw to Kamara more than I think Winston will. So that's something I'm going to watch if Winston comes back this week.
Yeah, I think the offense on balance has looked better under Andy Dalton. And, they've had some defensive letdowns these last few weeks, but they moved the ball against Arizona. They moved it against Cincinnati. They certainly moved it against Seattle. They even moved it against Minnesota, dating back to that London game. So I think the offense is actually on the right track. And almost all those games have come without Jarvis Landry and without Michael Thomas, so you're doing this with Kevin White and Rashid Shaheed and Jawan Johnson and all these guys. They didn't have their starting tight end for this game as well. So obviously you're disappointed to be sitting at 2-5 if you're in New Orleans, but I think you're encouraged about the direction that this offense is moving.
Yeah. Are you picking up Jawan Johnson if he's available this week?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think so. For the most part, I'm actually in decent shape at tight end. I got a lot of like Hunter Henry / Pat Freiermuth leagues, where I don't have Andrews or Kelsey. The one league I could probably use him, ironically, is where I do have Kyle Pitts, but no, I think I'll probably leave him alone this week.
All right, fair enough. They host Vegas this week. Arizona, talk about a tale of not quite 2 halves because the pick sixes happened in the 2-minute drill, basically. But up until that point, I mean, it wasn't a shiny, happy game. I mean, we had Kyler yelling with Cliff Kingsbury on the sideline because they burned that third time out. And he's like, blanking, relax. I think he said something of that to that end. They did get Eno Benjamin rolling. He looked pretty good. I wanted to see a little bit more of him. And Hopkins got his 10 targets. The only thing that Hopkins didn't do was score, but he was pretty solid. Hopkins returning crushed Ertz. It crushed Rondale Moore. That was the one thing. The other receiving options in this game, they really kind of withered away.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I actually liked the spot for Rondale Moore. I didn't really know how involved Hopkins would be. I thought this would maybe be kind of the last great week to potentially roster Moore. And I did so in DFS to no avail, 1 catch for 31 yards. But yeah,
and that was like the first drive too.
Exactly. I mean, if you're a Hopkins owner, this is best case scenario, right? I mean, they're basically force feeding him. He comes in just as Hollywood Brown exits. Obviously, that was not the plan for Arizona, but we kind of saw Kyler forcing things to Hollywood. He was far and away his favorite target, and I think Hopkins essentially just steps right back into that role. Now he's not going to go 10 for 103 every single week, but he is very clearly the number one guy, at least until Hollywood Brown is back. And we have no idea when that's going to be.
At least 4 to 6 weeks is what they were saying. He's on IR, so minimum of 4 weeks on that one there. Arizona at Minnesota this week, coming off the bye for Minnesota. So big game for that. They need to maintain a momentum to keep up with the Seahawks, for crying out loud. So we'll see. But anyways, all of our podcasts are brought to you by the Blue Wire Network. We play their ads as a result of that. We're going to do that right now. All right. Thank you for your indulgence. Big thanks to the Blue Wire Network. Let's move on to our next game. Let's just go with your Jaguars. Jaguars versus Giants.
Man,
they had this one again.
They had it again. It was just such a Jaguars game, man. I've developed a sense, from watching the Jaguars for 20 years, like when they're going to blow a game like this. And for me, I think it was like mid third quarter. I started texting my NFL friends saying like, hey, just want to let you guys know the Jaguars will lose this game. I know I had some friends who had money on the Giants. I'm like, rest assured, I know the Jaguars are up right now, but believe me, they will lose this game. And this is a team that just continues to have such bizarre decisions on like third and fourth down specifically. They yet again blew another 4th and short deep in Giants territory. Tried it was kind of a QB sneak type of play with Trevor Lawrence, but it was closer to a 4th and 2, and he gets a push forward, just didn't get enough for the first down. Obviously, would have been better to take the field goal there, essentially prevent the Giants from going up by more than a score after they go down and score. So it was such a disaster. It's such a disaster on offense. This is not a team that I really trust to make big conversions. And fantasy wise, huge alarm bells going off now for James Robinson, who is just not involved whatsoever. I think it's fully Travis Etienne's job, and he looked awesome in this game, but once again had a horrible turnover. Just an egregious fumble into the end zone. If Travis Etienne doesn't fumble that ball, I think the Jaguars win this game, and that's really the second time this year now that he's had a crushing turnover that's really affected the outcome.
I was surprised they didn't go to Robinson after that. I thought you might see Robinson, and he was on the field for some goal to go situations. I noticed that, but they didn't turn to him. Not only did Etienne lose that fumble, but he also had oven mitt hands on a play that wasn't an easy catch, but a catch. It was like above his head. It was wide open down the sideline. I mean, they had a lot of room for him to go. At the same time, he broke off the 49-yard run. I mean, he's so dynamic. They have to keep feeding him, and they are going to keep feeding him. I thought that was interesting. But just killer mistakes at the wrong time. And then they couldn't stop the Giants from running the ball. That was the other problem in this game.
Yeah, this Jags defense is not good. Saquon had 110 yards. I actually thought they did a pretty good job on Saquon Barkley, especially on early downs. They forced the Giants into a lot of third downs. Unfortunately, they let them convert 6 of those. 27 first downs for the Giants in this game. That's been the story the last few weeks for the Jags, is just not being able to get off the field, not being able to stop Daniel Jones on the ground. That's what killed them. 11 carries for 107 yards. He had a couple huge scrambles to keep extending drives late. Jacksonville's just not a smart team. I think that's something that has transcended, all the coaches that they've had. They routinely beat themselves more than any other team. They're kind of a low IQ football team. They commit bad penalties. And they're not disciplined, and you saw that time and time again. It's like, how are you continuing to fall for this play action when Daniel Jones is now just running wide open for a first down the sideline? So, pretty disappointing effort for the Jags. Obviously, they fall like a foot short. Nice play by Trevor Lawrence to get it to Christian Kirk on the last play of the game. But to me, that was one where you're like, Christian Kirk is he's not the type of player who's going to make a catch and then push through somebody. They don't have any big receivers. All their receivers are slot receivers, so you don't really, if you're throwing that ball and it's DK Metcalf catching it, he's probably falling forward into the end zone for the game winning touchdown, but if it's 5'9" Christian Kirk, you just can't really expect that to happen. So feels like we're heading down the same old road with the Jags, but once again, man, hats off to the Giants. 6-1 I think their 6 wins have come by a combined like 24 points or something crazy like that. Every game's been one score, but you saw today, the difference between the Jags are the more talented team. The Giants are the more disciplined and the better coach team.
Yeah. Wan'Dale Robinson looked pretty talented in the first half, but then he got hurt. And we didn't see him at all in the second half. And they have no weapons in the passing game. It's crazy. Slayton scored. He made a nice play actually on that score too. It was a nice throw by Dimes. Threw a dime on that one there. But for the most part, I mean, this is like a very Giants win just as much as it's a very Jaguars loss. I mean, it was both sides. I mean, you're right though. Kirk getting stopped short at the goal line, but it came down to like not quite. It wasn't quite a Hail Mary, but it was a desperation play to try to get in there. It comes down to that. That's it. It really was the Giants in control in that fourth quarter. If Barkley stays in bounds, we don't even get the drama at the end of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And you could tell, I think Saquon knew he should have gone out of bounds and was sweating that out a little bit at the end. But, I'm watching the Jags march down the field on that final drive. And like, I just had no faith that they were going to finish it off. And they got closer than I expected. I'll tell you that. But it's an offense right now that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. And as soon as they got stuffed on that 4th and 1 deep in Giants territory, it was pretty clear where this game was headed. But nonetheless, I mean, again, hats off to the Giants. They're officially, I think, a good team, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Once again, Jaguars get their annual London home game next week, home against Denver. So that'll be another slugfest. Will not be easy on the eyes, and especially when it's early, it'll be even harder on the eyes. Meanwhile, the Giants, they go on the road. They face the surging Seahawks. So that'll be a fun, Surprise Bowl.
That's going to be a really fun game. Both teams feel like they're moving in the right direction, but in very different ways. Seattle's just finding ways to kind of outscore teams every week. They're the more fun team to watch, certainly. Two very contrasting styles. That's for sure. I mean, the Giants kind of remind me of the old Seahawks in some ways. And then, Denver, Jacksonville, my goodness. I don't know what to do with that one. Jags
set the total at 29. I don't know.
We're sitting at 39.5. I would go under on that. That's for sure. We'll see who's under center for the Broncos. I think they probably hope it's Russell Wilson. Didn't love what I saw from Ripien in that game yesterday. But we'll tackle that one at a later date. I can't talk anymore, Jags. I just can't do it.
All right. We'll spare you that one there.
Thank you.
All right. Cleveland, Baltimore. Lamar Jackson has looked ordinary lately. No touchdowns yesterday. 9 for 16, 120, 10 for 59 on the ground. Lost another fumble. No, that was Justice Hill. I'm sorry. He didn't lose it. The Ravens, though, lost another fumble in the fourth quarter. And you start to think, okay, are the Ravens fourth quartering us again? Every time that the Ravens got a drive going, it seemed like they kept on falling short, at least to me. And they got the 2 touchdowns out of Gus Edwards. Kenyon Drake was the pickup bust of the week. Meanwhile, Edwards was the guy that was the real guy there. Drake is now a cut, I think. And that's a shame because I picked him up in a lot of leagues this past week, just out of desperation more than anything. I didn't really have any particular faith in him. But Edwards is the guy now.
Yeah, I think with last week with Drake, it felt a little fluky. Some of the long ones he was ripping off, and to his credit, they gave him a chance in this game. He did carry 11 times, but got absolutely nothing. 11 carries for 5 yards. I thought Gus Edwards was running really well. He passed the eye test for sure. Had 2 touchdowns. Baltimore got creative. They had Lamar Jackson, lined up at running back for one play. Mark Andrews taking the snap, pitching it to Lamar. It's kind of unnecessary, but a cool play nonetheless. But you said it with Lamar. This was a big win for Baltimore. It looked like one that they were maybe going to allow yet another team to climb back in and steal a win in the fourth quarter. They did a good job of doing just enough to slam the door shut. But I remember on the XM show, 3-4 weeks ago, we had, I want to say it was Tom or Greg from NFFC come on and basically say that, Lamar Jackson is a cheat code. If you have him in fantasy, he's like the biggest, the biggest league winner possible. And we're now going on 4 straight weeks, at least 3 straight weeks, where he's just been, like you said, very ordinary. No touchdowns in this game. Like the rushing yards have been there every week, and that's been nice to fall back on. But he struggled in that Cincinnati game. He struggled last week against the Giants, and he struggled again this week. Only 9 completions against a Cleveland defense that's been hemorrhaging passing yards to other quarterbacks around the league. So to me, Baltimore is still really beat up. You took a 0 from Mark Andrews this week. That's concerning. I do wonder how healthy he was coming into this game, and didn't really get a much of a boost from Rashad Bateman coming back either.
Bateman had a really nice catch early on. It went for 26 yards. I'm like, hey, Baltimore's been missing this take the top off type of play. But it was really very little after that. Mark Andrews, only 2 targets too. So I think you're right. I think he was almost in decoy mode a little bit there. He was questionable. Questionable means questionable. He missed, basically 2 full practices basically. So you can see maybe there's a little bit more. And they have the short week this week. Perhaps that was within that in mind, perhaps that maybe they limited their exposure to him this week because they were playing ahead most of the game. Cleveland was ahead in the first quarter, 10-3. They jumped them early. And starting with the ridiculous challenge by Kevin Stefanski, like a really dumb challenge. I mean, it really wasn't cause and effect because they didn't lose anything off of that except for a timeout. But so here's the scenario. They had forced the Ravens into a 4th down. But they wanted to rule him 10 yards farther back because they thought they had sacked Jackson. They thought that his knee was down. Turns out it wasn't enough to overturn. It's just a dumb they were already going to punt to him anyhow. It was a dumb challenge. And it's like at that point, they were still ahead 10-3. And then next thing you know, boom, boom, they score a couple scoring drives. It's 13-3 or 13-10 at the half. And then they kind of pushed away a little bit since. I mean, Cleveland got the late touchdown with Kareem Hunt. Hate seeing that over Chubb, but they were in hurry up mode, so that's why Hunt was on the field. But again, Cleveland, I mean, this is another game. They've had one game where they haven't been close to winning. This was another one where they could be 6-1 as easily as they are 2-5.
Yes, absolutely. I think realistically that they probably should be 4-3. I mean, maybe 5-2, like you said.
You can't give them everyone. Yeah.
There's a path to 6-1 though, for sure. And I think Jacoby Brissett at least avoided mistakes this week. I think last week, he kind of imploded for the first time all year, had some untimely interceptions early on, but I think for the most part had played pretty well. And he turned in a good performance today, got over 250 yards against this Ravens defense that still feels like we're not sure if they can actually stop guys or not. But yeah, Baltimore to me, they're still a team that I think could beat anybody on any given day. They should have beat Buffalo. We've already seen that. I still think they're a really scary team to prepare for, but they feel like they're kind of hanging on by a thread, where if Mark Andrews were to suffer like an actual injury or even when they were without Bateman, you just kind of see like, wow, this is a really shallow team at some positions that matter.
Yeah. Trading away Hollywood Brown and not replacing him with anything. That was the thing that still makes no sense for a team with the aspirations that they have, especially. So that was a surprise, but maybe it's salary cap driven. I don't know. Cleveland now hosts Cincinnati next week. We talked about Baltimore at the short week at Tampa Bay. Brissett got sacked 5 times, put the ball on the ground twice, lost one of them. Peoples-Jones lost a fumble. Both those were killer fumbles too, by the way. I mean, they did get the one recovered back from Justice Hill. They still had a chance to win this game, but after recovering that fumble, they couldn't convert the first down and had to punt it right back. That was a big part of that game too. They couldn't take advantage of the opportunities. They had the big play to Peoples-Jones in the first quarter after already going ahead and had to settle for a field goal after that.
Yep, they were forced into another long field goal attempt late in the game as well. Took a penalty on that drive. That was a killer. That's
right. And that was disputed, by the way.
Yep.
That made it a 60-yard attempt instead of 55. Right. And they actually, if you noticed, the announcers did a good job of pointing this out, that instead of like full 8 yards back from the line of scrimmage, they did 7.5 because it was such a long kick. And of course, it got tipped a little bit. Looked to me like it wasn't a good kick anyhow, but he was probably trying to kick it a little lower because it was so far out.
Yep. Exactly. Penalties, every yard matters when you're talking. The difference between 55 and 60, it's a big deal. And, you just kind of think of, someone like Justin Tucker who just, puts it up there and it's like, wow, that would have been good from 77 yards. Like not every team has that luxury whatsoever. Right. And like you said, that one, it looked like a really bad kick, but it was doomed from the start. I mean, he had to take such a low angle at that it was, especially when you got someone like Calais Campbell out there who's like 6'8" and can get his arms up over 7 feet. It just makes for almost an impossible kick. So the Browns, once again, kind of snatching victory away or snatching defeat away from the jaws of victory, whatever the phrase is.
You got it there. There you go.
Baltimore, by the way, 1.5 point favorites at Tampa Bay. And it kind of feels like now this is the week that the odds makers are no longer giving the Bucs the benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, like I feel like this is kind of a sneaky bounce back spot for Tampa Bay. I don't know. Like if this game was in Baltimore, I would love the Ravens, but I think it actually sets up to be a really interesting Thursday night matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. Definitely. It's two teams. It'll probably be another disappointment matchup on a Thursday night. At least last Thursday night was like cleanser for the soul from the previous two Thursday night games. Tucker, man, he's still the best. You know how putting greens sometimes will have the smaller holes every once in a while for working on you to work on just really getting to the center of the cup. Mm-hmm. Justin Tucker should have narrower goalposts than everybody else. Or like you get, if you hit the narrower gap, you get an extra point because you get from 55, it was still right down the middle. It was just ridiculous.
Well, I think it was the Cincinnati game. The game winner there, they said was like literally the most dead center kick ever. Since they've been tracking that, like he could not have hit it better. I would be opposed to that, by the way, like adding some more like obstacles, or it's like, all right, if you make it through this little square, it's worth 5 points, something like that. I don't see the NFL adopting that anytime soon. I'll be honest, but wouldn't be opposed.
Well, the people that hate kickers, they'd hate it, but shame on them. Too bad. All right. Dallas, Detroit. Man, this game was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think we were right to worry about some rust for Dak Prescott, who was fine in this game, but really not remarkable at all. We saw Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott do a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, this was just a classic split between those guys where like for the entire day, Tony Pollard looks like the better back. And then of course it's Ezekiel Elliott getting both of the short touchdowns to salvage a really nice fantasy day. 15 for 57 and 2. That's kind of the Zeke special at this point in his career. But that's why you draft him, because the Cowboys make a point continually to feed him those opportunities. This was once again about Dallas's defense though, just stepping up. I mean, sacked Jared Goff 5 times and a bunch of fumbles in this game, had 2 picks. It's a closer game than the score would imply. Dallas was really not able to get much going offensively at all until later in this game. And it was the defense just time and time again, 3 straight possessions forced a turnover at one point in the second half.
Yeah, that's right. Jamal Williams with a killer fumble on the goal line.
Yep.
Just brutal. I mean, Jared Goff was terrible in this one here. Elliott got a contusion on his right knee. I think he's going to be okay because he just said he just says I still have to go back and talk to the trainers, but he certainly didn't seem to miss that many reps. But there's a story about Elliott that I think is really interesting this year. He has 8 targets all season long. 8. He had 65 last year, 71 each of the last 2 years. I mean, he is just no longer a part of the passing game. And I think that's none yesterday, even with Dak back at the helm. I think that's noteworthy. I mean, they just won't use him at all in the passing game.
Yeah, very strange. Very, very strange, especially when you consider that, Pollard missed time early on. You'd think he would have racked up some targets. And maybe part of that is just kind of the Cooper Rush adjustment. Just his style maybe doesn't lend quite as well to that. We'll see if that picks up over the next couple of weeks with Dak. But I don't really feel like we got a representative Dak sample in this game. I think, in the coming weeks, we'll kind of start to see what he's going to look like this year. Right now, we have that kind of terrible week 1 game against the Buccaneers when we thought they were the best defense in the league. And then we have this, tough spot where he's coming off the injury. Really good spot next week on paper at home against the Chicago Bears. I think that could kind of be the official Dak is back coming out party game for him.
Yeah. Although Detroit's even better of a matchup, but we'll see what happens with the Bears tonight. But yeah, remember, I'm old enough to remember when the Lions led the NFL in scoring per game. They've scored 6 points their last 2 games combined.
Yeah, that was long, long ago. And even after getting blanked by the Patriots, they were still, I think, top 3 in scoring. But yeah, this offense, I mean, it kind of feels like we're starting to see like Jared Goff and Geno Smith had like very similar starts to the season. We're seeing Geno Smith being able to continue it, and we're seeing Jared Goff kind of come full circle.
Yeah. But in fairness to Goff, he had no DeAndre Swift. He functionally had no Amon-Ra St. Brown. True. Got the concussion really early in that one there. Had a really nice DFS lineup with him in there. That was a bummer. It's all about me. And then, no DJ Chark for at least 3 more weeks after this one, and he hasn't had him in a while. I mean, your top targets were Khalif Raymond and Brock Wright and TJ Hawkinson. That's also part of the problem, too. is that he just didn't have. He doesn't. At least Geno has Tyler Lockett and Kenneth Walker, although he lost Metcalf in that game. So similar adversity, I suppose, but still more depth there in skill position players than the Detroit has right now.
Yeah, I mean, we said it against Minnesota as soon as Amon-Ra St. Brown went down. That kind of felt like the moment everything changed for this Lions offense, and not having him at full speed in this game really, really hurt them. And you mentioned Swift, but it felt like they were able to survive okay without DeAndre Swift, with how well Jamal Williams was playing. But I think it's clear now to be the offense that it looked like they were through 4 games, they need both St. Brown and Swift at full speed.
Yep. This is a team that has all the trappings now of looking like they're the leaders in the clubhouse for Bryce Young next year, though, and especially because there's going to be a need at quarterback.
No, I think you're right. And I mean, imagining what this offense can look like with Bryce Young, pretty tantalizing.
Yeah. Although there'll be some growing pains as is the case with any rookie, but they host Miami next week. So we'll see if they can bounce back at home in that one there. As you mentioned, Dallas gets the Bears next week. So not bad there. Let's share a note here from our friends at Swagger. There are 50 million fantasy sports players and sports bettors in the U.S., but 90% of all cash prizes are won by only 2% of all players. That's because most sports gaming options were created for pros. The dudes dropping loads of cash on data to find an edge over the rest of us. Not Swagger. Swagger is a daily fantasy sports site created for sports fans who simply want some skin in the game and a real shot at winning. Tired of losing because of one bad pick? With Swagger, you don't need to be perfect to win. You simply create a ticket of 4 to 10 simple player props and score points for the ones you get right. Your score determines your win, not the perfect ticket. You can be half right and be all right with Swagger. Swagger offers the most player props and biggest payouts of any DFS site, as much as 50 times your money. Plus, you can play fantasy football along with all the major U.S. pro sports, as well as international soccer, Formula One, NASCAR, fight sports, rugby, cricket, and even esports. Ready to play? Visit playwithswagger.com/RotoWire to sign up, and Swagger will give you $10 free to try them out, plus match your first deposit 100% up to $100. Swagger, daily fantasy for all mankind. All right. We just covered Dallas and Detroit. I think we still have Indianapolis and Tennessee from the early slate. This was another ugly offensive game for both teams here, Nick.
Yes, it was, and that's kind of been the theme. It feels like week after week, where we have these matchups that on paper look like they should be really intriguing, and that is ultimately not the case. I don't know. I mean, we kind of went into this matchup, expecting this one to be a little uglier than some of the others around the league. But to me, it absolutely, Jeff, lived up to the hype in that regard.
Yeah, it sure did. Again, first of all, I think Tennessee just owns Indy. I think Vrabel he's always got it dialed in for this game. They correctly identifies this is the matchup to win the division. And now that they've got a stranglehold on it. They're 4-2, but they're also, and the Colts are only 3-1. They're not that bad overall record, but they've now lost twice to Tennessee. They've lost to Jacksonville once, and they tied Houston. So they're 1-3-1 in the division with only one Houston game left in division. So they're going to have to accomplish it elsewhere and hope that it doesn't come down to a tiebreaker. So they essentially they add like 2 half games behind Tennessee because of the tie and because of the head-to-heads. So they're in really tough shape now.
Yeah, it's starting to feel like this is going to be Tennessee's division to lose, certainly. And I think they're the type of team that if you're Jacksonville, you don't feel good about how you match up. They're a smart team. They're a team that doesn't beat themselves. They're basically the opposite of the Jags in every way. And, the Colts, it felt like we're running hot by their standards coming into this game. And I don't know, man. It was a kind of another regression type of game for Matt Ryan. 243 yards, but needed 33 completions to get there. He's back to being sacked. Took 3 sacks in this game, threw a couple of picks. Magically, he's now gone 2 straight weeks without fumbling. So I think in the same spirit of like the 72 Dolphins, Kerry Collins and Dante Culpepper, maybe starting to feel a little bit more comfortable as the season goes along. But yeah, the other story here too is just yet again Jonathan Taylor not being able to get going. 10 carries, 58 yards. They fell behind, 13-0 early in this game. And I think once again felt like they needed to kind of resort to the pass. And that's worked a couple times this season. It certainly worked against Jacksonville, but Tennessee is just a much more disciplined defense. And, can't be shocked that Indianapolis only scored 10 points if Taylor's only getting 10 carries.
I don't think you can understate the importance of that pick six. I mean, right. it was just brutal. I mean, Tennessee didn't score an offensive touchdown all game. No. I mean, the Colts defense played actually reasonably well, but that pick six changed things. The Colts were driving. It was a 3-0 game at the time. Boom, pick six. All of a sudden it's 10-0, and the Colts kind of abandoned. I mean, Taylor was averaging almost 6 yards a carry. They just gave up on that again. Similar to the game last year, at Tennessee. Remember, he ran really well in that game, just not enough. And that's just, it's tough. I mean, they had the 3 sacks, they had 3 turnovers. I mean, it's hard to run the ball when you're doing all those things there. You get into tough spots. Penalty wise, I mean, it was a pretty clean game, only 4 penalties for the Colts, so that wasn't an issue, but just a team that's hard to watch. I mean, Taylor got a lot of targets at least. Paris Campbell, we saw a little bit of him, got the touchdown plus 10 catches total. Again, nothing really deep downfield. And that's a problem for this team. They have a hard time because they have to throw the ball quickly. That's the adjustment that the Colts have made. Otherwise those 3 sacks turn into 6.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of in that same zone as Tampa and Green Bay, ironically, where you have this aging quarterback who, doesn't trust his offensive line, feels like he needs to get the ball out a ton. Much like Tampa and Green Bay, on paper, you have a running game that should be really successful, but you inexplicably go away from it to kind of feed into one of your weaknesses, which for this Colts team, other than Michael Pittman, you don't have a lot of great pass catchers that you feel good about. I mean, Paris Campbell, like you said, did have another good week. He flashed against Jacksonville as well, had a nice touchdown catch in this game. But yeah, there's no flow with Indianapolis. Everything feels forced. It feels like they're in a lot of 3rd and longs. You're asking Matt Ryan to do things that at this point in his career, he's just going to struggle to do.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't love Tennessee by any means, but here they are, 4-2. 4 weeks ago, we were asking if maybe they would kind of do a soft tank and maybe try to get themselves in position to draft a quarterback. And that's not happening. And I think they're marching likely towards another playoff berth. And it's going to be ugly. It's going to continue to be ugly. But in this division, that's more than enough.
That's their brand. Tannehill got banged up in this one there. And in fact, we saw Malik Willis, I think, come in for a snap. But then Tannehill came back into the game. Willis didn't throw the ball or anything like that. So
he came in, like, somewhat contributed to this. They had this weird play where they had some motion and a pitch and ended up fumbling it. Malik Willis was involved there. So it was kind of a confusing little cameo for him. But luckily Ryan Tannehill came back into the game. I think if they had to finish this out with Malik Willis, it could have got a little dicey, but Tannehill was able to come in, steady the ship, and they end up tacking on a field goal late that against the Colts, going up 2 scores, with 6 minutes left, that feels like the end of the game.
Yeah. Malik Willis should be a game manager, except he's not even ready to be a game manager right now. He looks not ready every single time we see him out there. But the Titans recognize this and don't put him in those situations. So there you go. All right. So enough of that game. Let's move on to the afternoon slate, where the games, with the one notable exception, were a lot more watchable. Let's rip off the Band-Aid and get the unwatchable one first. The Jets and the Broncos. Breece Hall first. Gross injury. Had the long touchdown run, a 62-yard run. And, at least, I mean, what we've seen from that too is it looks like it's pretty bad. They haven't given it a full diagnosis yet, but they did say it was an ACL injury. So that's pretty bad too. Going to be, you can't go out and get Michael Carter in most leagues. He's taken in like 67% of leagues. If you happen to be in that one token league where someone had to cut him because of bye week issues or whatever, jump on him obviously, but this is tough. Maybe they're going to be forced to use Zach Wilson a lot more.
Yeah, I think so. And after Breece Hall went out in this game, there were certainly some dicey possessions late. The Jets just they were able to tack on a couple of field goals. One of those coming after an interception by Brett Ripien that helped them here. But I mean, you still don't really have a lot of faith in Zach Wilson. He had a couple plays where he nearly took literally a 25-yard sack.
Yeah.
He's just spinning around. He's stiff arming and you're just get rid of the ball, please. This is not going to be a positive play. So he was still a pretty big liability in this game, albeit against a good Denver defense. So you give him some benefit of the doubt there. Ian Rappaport this morning did confirm torn ACL for Breece Hall. Also has some meniscus damage as well. That's not good to hear. Obviously, his season is done. I mean, we've had a lot of big injuries. There's big injuries every year, but this one, man, sitting at 5-2, like this just feels like kind of a pretty big momentum sucker for the Jets.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's awful. And you're right about Wilson. He's going to make one of those plays is going to go really sideways soon if he keeps trying to do that there.
Yeah. Well, he almost had one too. And I think Denver challenged it where he like is going to the ground and tried to throw it away as he was going to the ground. Very easily could have been ruled a fumble. That would have been returned for a touchdown by Denver. So in that case, he was fortunate not to have one of those plays. But yeah, I mean, there were 3 or 4 times where you're kind of panicking when the ball's in his hands late.
Absolutely. Can't blame the Denver defense. They only allowed 260 yards of offense in this one here. But the offense is just so like prehistorically bad. I mean, it's just awful offense to watch. Ripien was really rough. Somehow he managed 46 attempts, which is not what you want to do when you have a really rough quarterback, but they were trailing most of the game still, but almost always, it was always within one score. That was the thing that was really weird is, I mean, it was 10-9 at the half. They just could not get on track. Tough team, man. Gordon was 11 for 33 as the starter. Mike Boone got banged up. We saw Tavius Murray get the 1 touchdown, of course, because now we knew he wasn't going to start, but only 8 for 24. The only guy that seemed to like benefit from anything was Jerry Jeudy, who went 7 for 96, had that big 45-yard play, had 11 targets total. Sutton was targeted 9 times just to no good effect, and we could see that late in the game. He just Ripien couldn't get him the ball.
Yeah, credit to Ripien for, they took a couple deep shots late, had a decent drive going where if you're the Jets, you didn't feel super comfortable late in that game. And it looked like they had an interception on a 3rd down. That ends up being called back. So there was kind of one last gasp for Denver. But, to me, it looked like a play where they were just hoping to draw a penalty rather than taking a real shot. Yeah. I mean, Denver now has played 6 games that feel exactly the same. Yep. Other than that 32-23 loss to the Raiders, these are their final scores so far, whether they've won or lost. 17-16, 16-9, 11-10, 12-9, 19-16, 16-9. I mean, wow. There's just no variance. It is the exact same thing week to week.
It's Groundhog Day. It really is.
Crazy.
How is this game not like 35 on the total coming up against Jacksonville for Denver?
Yeah, it should be. It really should be. I think there's maybe too much faith being put in this Jags offense, I guess. But I mean, other than that Raiders game, they've gone 0 for 6 on having any games where either team involved reaches 20 points. Like, how insane is that?
That's
the year
so
of our
hard
Lord,
to do.
In the year of our Lord, 2022. I mean, if you could have got odds on that coming into the year, I mean, it would be like 1,000 to 1. It's unbelievable. And I don't, whether Russ plays or not, I don't know if that really changes anything. I don't think the offense looked all that different.
Russ has a partially torn hamstring too.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And remember, he had a PRP injection in his shoulder. He is all sorts of banged up. And we know, we've seen it last year. When he comes back too soon, it's ugly. It's been ugly all this year too, for that matter. I think he's still a step above Ripien, but yeah, it's a tiny step now and not one giant leap for mankind. Josh Johnson is the backup to Ripien, another career backup type. So they don't really have any sort of planning, and they don't have a 1st-round pick next year either. So yay.
No, they do not. No, there a lot of people, I don't know if you've seen this, have made kind of crossover jokes of like the Broncos are the Lakers of the NFL, Russell Wilson, Russell Westbrook comparisons. Yeah, it started to feel that way. The Lakers are 0-3. They just blew another lead yesterday. And it's like, oh yeah, wait, if they finish with a bottom 5 record, their pick is going straight to the New Orleans Pelicans. And yeah, that's the same thing with Denver. They could very well finish this season with like 4 wins and end up handing over like the 5th pick in the draft to the Seattle Seahawks.
Yep. Just like who has the Saints pick? I think it's the Eagles, right?
Yes. Is that from the Olave deal?
I believe so.
I think it is. Yeah.
So yeah, there's good teams getting great picks too. It seems fair. Seems real fair there. Yeah. Keep an eye out on Ty Johnson a little bit with Breece Hall out. They like to usually use 2 running backs. Johnson only had like 1 carry. Last year, he had 55 targets, though. So in a PPR league, if you're desperate, might be a play. We mentioned who Denver's got. The Jets have a big game at home against the Pats this week. So 5-2 Jets.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not, and when the Bengals beat them early in the year, they looked pathetic, but they really kind of righted the ship. Funny how you don't have a bad quarterback throwing the ball 50 times makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, when's the last time we've had a Jets-Pats game that feels like it matters in the regular season? I mean, it's been at least 10 years, I would think. And their next three, they go Pats, Bills, bye, and then Pats again. So this season could go one of two ways. If you find a way to come out of that, like 1-2, even, I think you're okay, or 2-1. Certainly you feel great about it. But this is going to be a tough little stretch here for the Jets. Obviously you're happy to be 5-2, but very interested to see how much losing Breece Hall impacts them, because I think he was very clearly their best playmaker.
Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt. We'll see what happens with Elijah Moore heading up in the trade deadline. They say they're not going to trade him. They haven't traded Denzel Mims. Mims had a drop yesterday. That's the only time I remember seeing Mims out there. Yeah. But we'll see. The Jets could be one of those teams that's active at the trade deadline here. I don't think they'll trade for a back. I think they'll trade for other currency. Might even be for a pick in the case of, but I don't think they trade Elijah Moore either, though. I think is Elijah Moore. You don't have any Elijah Moore. I know this because you made a point of telling me. I have him in the Invitational. I have him, I think, in a couple other places, like a 5th or 6th round pick. Is he straight up a drop now?
Well, I mean, right now he's like barely even on the team. So I think so. I mean, if you can afford to hold him until after the deadline, just so you maybe get some confirmation on what his situation is going to be. Like, as of now, the messaging from the team is, hey, we told him, look, we think you're a good guy. We don't think you're like a team cancer type of player at all. I was reading some report over the weekend that, they graded him as highly as possible in terms of character coming out of college. So I don't think this is like a, Antonio Brown type of situation or anything like that. They basically said, look, take the weekend off, go home, clear your head. We would love to have you back on this team next week. So I think we're going to find out in the next day or two where this situation is headed. If he wants to kind of dig in deeper and really try to force a trade, then this could get ugly. But I don't think the Jets, it's not like a two-way feud here. I think the Jets want him to be a part of this offense. And with Breece Hall out, they're going to need more playmaking somewhere. I will say, I agree with you. Michael Carter actually, ran okay in this game. I mean, didn't have anything more than a 5-yard run, but he still runs hard. Had a nice catch and run late that set the Jets up for one of their field goals. I think that was an underrated play in this game. I did see a little smoke of like, hey, if you're the Jets, you got some good vibes going. You don't want the season to go away. Maybe you call the Cleveland Browns and see if you can get Kareem Hunt, who, as we know, was in a similar situation as Elijah Moore, coming into the year, asked for a trade. The Browns tell him absolutely not. But you do wonder if maybe they've changed their tune on that.
Yeah. Difference is Hunt, it's all about the contract. With Morris, because he just wants to play more. I mean, you want wide receivers to want the ball more often. I mean, that's for sure. I just think, Zach Wilson is not a good match for Elijah Moore, I guess. That's all I can think of. The problem is they're pod committed with Wilson. I mean, you spent the number 2 overall pick on him. I mean, all that. And maybe he needs more time, but usually you see it by now. And you haven't seen a whole lot with him.
No, we have not. I think, like you said, they're pot committed for this year, at least. After that, you have to reevaluate, but they're not going to make some sort of change midway through, especially they're sitting at 5-2. It's not because of Zach Wilson, but they're 5-2 nonetheless.
Exactly right. Moving on to Vegas. Raiders over the Texans. Josh Jacobs, man, he is so, not only is he like a workhorse, he's legit. Now, he was the DFS chalk play that paid off. I mean, and the thing is, this is a reminder, you got a chalk play in a cash game, just keep playing him. I mean, he was crazy. 20 for 143, just killed the end of the game for the Raiders so nicely. 3 touchdowns. I mean, it was everything you wanted out of him. And for a Raiders team that not much has gone right this year, that Josh Jacobs has gone very right.
We left Josh Jacobs for dead during draft season, and boy, were we wrong about that. I mean, he's up to RB2 status now in PPR leagues. He's behind only Austin Eckler in terms of fantasy points per game. He's ahead of Saquon. He's ahead of Chubb. He's ahead of Henry, and is showing no signs of slowing down. I mean, these last 3 games, 28 for 144, 21 for 154, 20 for 143, and then the 3 touchdowns this past week against Houston. I mean, we're at this point in the year, like if you did like all pro voting right now, like he might be a first team all pro running back. Like he has been that dominant over the last 3 weeks. And the Raiders, the passing game continues to be up and down. Obviously, missing Darren Waller has been a key issue for them. Like, we're seeing a lot more Mac Hollins involvement than I ever thought we would coming into the year. But we did not think they'd be able to lean on Josh Jacobs the way that they have. And this was not a wire-to-wire beatdown by the Raiders at all. This was a close game that Houston, I thought, actually played better early on. But once they kind of, were resigned to the fact in the second half that, like, hey, we're just going to keep riding our starting running back here. And they scored touchdowns on 3 straight drives. And that was basically it, tacked on a pick 6 at the end as well. I mean, he's been unbelievably dominant. I will fully admit I did not see this coming at all.
No. Houston was up 2017 late into the third quarter. Vegas scored with I think 4 minutes left, or a little over 3 minutes left, I think. And that was it. They got the touchdown. They went ahead, and actually that was it. Actually, it was in the fourth quarter that they went ahead. So there you go. I mean, and then they pulled away late. The Texans, they had a sequence where they had 4th and 1 where they're lining up to go for it. False start. They get the other way. I think they settled for the field goal. They go down the other way there. Or it might have even been a punt after that. I got to look and see. Actually, it was a punt, if I recall correctly. That's exactly it. It was 4th and 1. They're lined up to go for it from their own 33. They have the false start. They punt it away. Vegas turns around and drives, gets to a 4th and 1. They draw the Texans off sides, keep the drive alive, score the touchdown, then a pick 6. It's game over. It's just like that. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, it was such a weird sequence of events. It worked perfectly and perfectly for the Texans there. Just awful sequence for them.
Yeah, I mean, watching that game from the Texans, I'm thinking, like, man, this team beat the Jaguars a couple weeks ago. Like, that's really that's where the Jaguars are right now. That's why I could not get that out of my head. I mean, this is not a good team. I mean, Davis Mills, I thought, actually looked really good in the first half, was dropping some major dimes, but kind of started to regress in the second. Still ended up with probably his best game of the year thus far statistically, but the pick 6 was a killer. Although at that point, that was the drive right after Houston jumped off sides on that 4th down. Once that happened, you kind of knew the Raiders were going to finish it off and punch that in, and the game was essentially over. But the only real, I think, positive takeaway for Houston, another good game for Dameon Pierce. Didn't get in the end zone, but did rush 20 times for 92 yards. Continues to just look really, really good, really active, really physical runner. Not an easy player to bring down, and you don't always see that from rookies, especially rookies on bad teams with bad offensive lines. But he continues to do really well.
Yeah, he does. So, the passing game for Houston is rough, though. I mean, Mills is regressing some. Cooks got hurt. Not only Cooks, but Nico Collins got hurt in this one. Even, and Collins was definitely out the rest of the way. I mean, we saw Chris Moore scoring. We saw Philip Dorsett scoring. I didn't know he was still in the league, but there was a lot of that in the afternoon games. Marquise Goodwin going off.
That? Yeah, Marquise Goodwin. That was the other one I saw. Like, he's going off in Seattle. I'm like, who is this guy? But yeah, I mean, the Texans are kind of collecting some of those players who you didn't realize. I think Rex Burkhead for a lot of people is probably still in that category. Ex-Badger Dare Agumbawale going 5 for 54 out of nowhere in this game as well. He was kind of the backup running back, Rex Burkhead. Just a strange day as usual for this Houston offense. And you talk about guys who might be traded. There's starting to be some Brandon Cooks smoke as well. Obviously, someone who's no stranger to being dealt, but you could see Houston, make that move, maybe pick up an extra draft pick.
Yeah, they could. They got through this. The Raiders got through this game without Darren Waller. Foster Moreau went 3 for 28, nothing special. Mac Hollins had a sweet touchdown. He was kind of questionable going into this game. He actually a game time decision for him to score like that. Renfrow returned 3 for 55, but it was mostly Adams with most of the targets. 8 for 95 on 9 targets. Didn't get in the end zone, unfortunately. Most of it was Josh Jacobs doing that, though. There's a reason for that.
Yeah, that Matt Collins touchdown was big. That was right before halftime. Time was running out. They were down to like 20 seconds, and that was from like 25, 30 yards out. Really nice high throw by Derek Carr. Really place where only Matt Collins could come down with it. He makes the catch, gets hit. Not an easy catch whatsoever. Pretty good chance that they have to settle for a field goal if he doesn't make that reception. So that one was huge, for Las Vegas to tie that game at halftime, get some momentum, and obviously that carried over into the second half. My only other note from this game, Foster Moreau, every time he catches the ball, it's like a high school coach's dream. Like he goes into like full on fullback mode and he carries it like Mike Allstott carried the ball. Like is not really all that interested in like gaining speed or picking up yards. It was just like, all right, I have the ball. I'm not fumbling no matter what.
Yeah, that's funny. It's so funny. Well, after Renfro had the fumble 6 earlier against the Cardinals, like you can see why a little bit there. Vegas goes on the road next week. They're at New Orleans. Meanwhile, Houston, on the other hand, returns home. They get a home game against Tennessee. It's their last stand. Really, it's not even that. I still think Houston versus Detroit versus Carolina for the race to be the first pick next year. I think those are your top 3 lead dogs.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. The Jags might throw their hat in the ring. They did lose to Houston, but yeah, I think Houston's okay with that. That's kind of closer to the expectations we had for this team coming into the year. Meanwhile, though, the Raiders, I think if they had lost this game, I don't know how you could expect them to make the playoffs. They're still hanging around now, especially with the Chargers taking another loss. Of course, you feel good about the Chiefs winning that division, but they're not out of it. Chargers are 4-3, Raiders sitting at 2-4. Still a much better team than a lot of the other 2-4 teams around the league.
Exactly right. All right, 3 more games left to cover. Before we do that, though, quick note from our final sponsor. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action that you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. All right. Kind of saved the best games for last here, best 2 afternoon games from a watchability standpoint, starting with the Chiefs' evisceration of the Niners. The Niners, I mean, for a while they were ahead. They were driving the ball. They jumped them early. I think they were up 10-0. They were up 13-7. But they were settling for field goals. And you knew you just don't settle for field goals against the Chiefs.
Yeah, Mahomes threw an early interception that contributed to that 10-0 start for San Francisco. It looked like there was just felt like there was more of a buzz, around this team, post McCaffrey trade, like everything's rolling. And, like we've seen a couple times this year, it was kind of reminiscent of that Raiders game a few weeks ago. Kansas City responds with a touchdown. They hold to a field goal on the next drive. All of a sudden you blink and they're up 14-13. And you're like, what the heck? Yep. What happened here? Like the 49ers felt like they were in control. Jimmy G ends up throwing a pick late in the first half. And
what a horrible pick too.
Right. Even though Kansas City didn't even score on the ensuing possession, it was just about that hold. That had come, I believe, right after the Sky Moore muff punt, which he's quietly become kind of a liability.
That's for the third time, I think, this year.
Yep.
That's happened.
He had one against Indianapolis that sent that game off the rails right away. This one felt like it was heading that direction, but man, this Kansas City offense is so fun to watch. It feels like whenever they want to rip off a 25-yard gain, there's just somebody running wide open in the middle of the field. And we saw one of the best throws of the year from Mahomes to Marquez Valdez-Scantling on a 3rd and long at a time where it felt like if they didn't get that and they punted back to San Francisco, this game was about to change. So just, this was Patrick Mahomes just being Mahomes, and a really impressive effort from Kansas City on a day where I felt like, other than the Garoppolo interception, I thought the 49ers played pretty well in this game. It was just the Chiefs being a better team.
Yeah, second half, it kind of got off the rails a little bit there when they started having to throw every down. Garoppolo got sacked 5 times, had the fumble, lost the fumble too. They brought in Brock Purdy. Which demonstrated that they don't need to bring in Brock Purdy anymore. It's just, about the only positive was the George Kittle, asserting himself in this offense a little bit more. Had the nice touchdown, 6 for 98 in this one. He's getting him, back up to the circle of trust level now, where you're starting him. You were going to start him if you had him every week, almost because of your draft investment costs, but he's now comfortably a top 5 tight end for me.
Yeah, I think part of it's by default. Darren Waller, we don't know what his status is week to week. He's kind of been in the same bucket as Kittle regardless. And there's just not a lot of other guys that you trust ahead of George Kittle. And I'm still not all that sold on him being this good and this consistent week to week, but you just don't have the normal amount of tight ends that you feel good about falling back on. On the other side, I mean, Juju, another big game. That's back-to-back weeks now, north of 100 yards for him. So those of us, who've held strong on Juju Island seems to be paying off at the right time. MVS, just a classic MVS line, 3 for 111.
Yep.
No touchdowns. Travis Kelce, 6 for 98, the usual from him. Saw a decent amount of McCaffrey in this game. They worked him in gradually in the first half. Didn't do a ton, kind of split the workload with Jeff Wilson, but looked good for the most part. Obviously, as they get him up to speed, I mean, they have probably the two most dangerous, like Swiss Army knife type of players in the entire league in McCaffrey and Debo on the same team. So I think, good job by Kansas City adjusting on the fly and not really letting either of those guys beat them. I mean, this was one of Debo Samuel's quietest games of the year.
Which raises the question, and this was brought up when I was doing a radio hit on Saturday with Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey on Sirius XM Fantasy. Does the addition of McCaffrey make you worry a little bit if you are a Debo Samuel manager?
I think a little bit. And it's like, how many of those gadgety plays that go to Debo now go to McCaffrey, right? I don't worry about him losing targets in the passing game necessarily. But I some of those kind of pre-designed plays that have often been, ripped off huge gains for Debo Samuel. If he's losing half of those to McCaffrey, yeah, it's definitely a concern. I think obviously you're not like benching Debo Samuel going forward, but I think you lower your expectations or his rest of season projection, if you want to phrase it that way.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Big game for the Niners coming up next week. They're at the Rams, rematch of the Monday night game from earlier where the Niners defense just eviscerated them. This is not your same Niners defense. They have so many injuries right now. Their secondary is basically eviscerated. Their front four is really racked up with injuries. That's a big part of the Niners struggles here is they can't defend the pass right now.
No, they cannot. And you're getting the Rams coming off a bye too. So on paper, I think this looks like a good spot for San Francisco. You look at the previous result and you say, well, of course they'll do it again. But the Rams are one of those teams that always seems to do well coming off of a bye, even if Kyle Shanahan has always had McVay's number. I have no other notes from this game, although we should note that
I have
the Indianapolis Colts are benching Matt Ryan and Sam Ehlinger will get the start next week. So I hate to turn back the clock and make us talk about the Colts more, but pretty major news here.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting that it's Ehlinger that's getting the start too. It's every year it's something different here. I mean, does that almost makes me think that puts the Colts in, it's a desperation play. Sounds like it's Irsay wading in and making the decision from what I'm reading on my timeline really quick here. Frank Wright said he stopped short of saying it was Irsay's decision, but Irsay has been increasingly involved behind the scenes as of late. That's
that
never
like
good.
It was Irsay's decision.
I've seen never a good thing.
Yeah, I'm seeing a quote from Frank Reich who says, right now, the move is for Sam Ehlinger to be the starter for the rest of the season. So this does not seem like a 1 week experiment and then we reevaluate it. It seems like if as long as Sam Ehlinger is not a complete disaster and he stays healthy, this is the team going forward. I guess I hard to fault him, but at the same time, I mean a drastic move. I don't think we saw this playing out this quickly. I don't think it's like shocking that Indianapolis would give Ehlinger a chance, but to essentially come out and say, yeah, this is the guy for the rest of the year. I don't really see why that's necessary to tack on.
Seems gratuitous. As much as we have justifiably dunked on Matt Ryan, I don't see Ehlinger as being okay. Well, this is good. If I'm a Michael Pittman guy, I'm really unhappy about this.
Yeah, I think what Ehlinger brings that Matt Ryan doesn't is just the ability to move. And I think if you're the Colts, you're probably just sick of seeing Matt Ryan just get hit and hit and hit. And this probably, unfortunately, this kind of sends the fumble record out the window.
I know.
I guess there's that.
No sense of history here.
Hopefully they trade him somewhere where he could start and continue fumbling. But I mean, Sam Ehlinger is just like the complete opposite of Matt Ryan. So to me, this, whether it's a rash move by your owner or just some sort of just, shakeup that you want to see, I think at least you're not pivoting from Matt Ryan to Nick Foles, who's ultimately a fairly similar quarterback. We should see a very different looking Colts team. It might be worse in the short term. It might be worse for guys like Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman, but at least they're not just going to, kind of keep running themselves into a brick wall every single week.
Yeah, they are. I think they are.
Might be doing it. They might be taking a different path, But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I actually kind of applaud teams for doing things like this. Like, I think you
get
can
you.
see, like, what was the upside with Matt Ryan?
Yeah, I get you. They have to figure out a longer term solution at quarterback and keep, I still think in my mind of the Chargers schedule reveal anime, where they for their projecting their Colts game, they had a QB carousel with Pat McAfee running the carousel as the operator and showing Phillip Rivers and showing Brissett and showing Carson Wentz. Now that's all I can think of right now. Yeah, they're kind of like the Indianapolis Colts are kind of like the Pacers, square in the middle, not bad enough to tank, so they can't get a top 3 pick, so they can't get that, their all-time quarterback. They had it in Luck. I mean, they've had two. They've had Manning and Luck, so they've had that before, but now they're kind of stuck in this middle zone where they can't get an elite quarterback for the future in the draft. But they can't sign one. No elite quarterback wants to manufacture their way to Indianapolis, so they're kind of stuck in this middle.
They need to find their next Curtis Painter, is what this comes down to. Like, who's the guy that could pilot us to 1-16 in a path to drafting an elite quarterback?
Great throwback. I love it. Good stuff. Oh man, I do have other takeaways from Kansas City, San Francisco. So let's get back to that real quick. The jet sweep. The Niners looked like they had never seen a jet sweep in their life. And they ran 3 touchdowns off that. Hardman had 2 of them, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire scored on a jet sweep as well. So it's like, that was amazing. The other thing is, how much did you fall prey to the Isaiah Pacheco's getting first-team reps and will start craze?
Well, unfortunately, I dropped Pacheco in the leagues where I had him. Early on, I kind of got frustrated, cut bait there, and he had been picked up in most spots by the time that news came through. So I was in a bit of a panic that I didn't have him, and it turned out to not be all that big of a deal. And of course, it's Edwards-Helaire who gets the touchdown. And
right, of
Pacheco
course,
only carried 8 times for 43 yards. It felt like his biggest imprint on this game came via a long kick return. I think that was to begin the second half. But interested to see what that means, for the next few weeks. But it didn't really seem to pay many dividends in the short term.
Yeah, 8 for 43. He ran well. The Chiefs ran well. They just didn't run much.
Yeah.
He had more carries than Edwards-Helaire, but McKinnon isn't going away either. McKinnon had that big screen pass on one play to get him down in the red zone. I woke up early because I had an 8:00 soccer game for my kid yesterday morning. So I got up at like 5:30. And at that point in time, the Rappaport report came out. I don't understand how all the local beat writers said nothing, zip, nada about Pacheco getting first team reps. How did Rappaport be the only one that had this? When it's talking about practice reps, wasn't that observable? Maybe they did it when the non-media portion was present, but how did he get this scoop? And why did it come out overnight Saturday night? It was just so weird.
It was strange. It also doesn't seem like something that the team would need to announce or leak. Like you said, it's an observation type of thing. Like I don't strategically, the team's not going to come out and be like, you know what, Pacheco's the guy this week. And yeah, I don't know if maybe they did a clever job of disguising that throughout the week. And I mean, ultimately, it was basically an even split. It was 19-17 in terms of snaps in favor of Pacheco. So there's a chance that maybe that report was a little exaggerated as far as what we expected the split to be in terms of usage between those two.
Yeah, starter. Pacheco didn't get any targets. They don't trust him in the passing game. They don't trust him in pass pro. That part is pretty clear. He is a runner, which makes him one-dimensional, which makes it when he's in the game, they're not going to be doing too many passes. They'll do some, obviously, to keep you honest, but it is the Chiefs after all. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. I think there will still be weeks where he's valuable, but targeting when and where that's going to be is awfully tough. Chiefs are off next week. And we already talked about the Niners. Let's talk a little bit about the Chargers and the Seahawks. I mean, kudos to the Seahawks because they were the better team all along. They jumped the Chargers 17-0 early in this game. And then, Chargers got it to within 17-14, and then the Seahawks took right back off again. Geno Smith is dealing, Nick. 20 for 27, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 pick. They didn't ask him to throw a lot, but once again, he is solid back there.
I've been searching for the words to describe Geno Smith, and I saw a tweet this morning that said Geno leads the league in holy F. I'm not going to say the word, but you know what I mean. Throws this year, and that's exactly what it is. It's like he still has these mistakes every now and then. Was not perfect in this game by any means. Had an interception, I think that was called back. But when he needs to place a ball, I mean, he's doing it so routinely that it's alarming, especially when you're seeing guys like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady kind of repeatedly fail at that. Russell Wilson in that camp as well. I mean, the tight throws, the on time throws, you have one little window where your guy has just enough space to get 2 feet down type of throws. We saw one of those to Goodwin. I mean, he's just been dialed in. He's been fantastic. And, other than that fumble, which was not really on Geno Smith, I think it was charged to him, but it was really D. Eskridge, who looked like it was his fault, took his eyes off the ball on a pitch play.
Right.
Other than that, I mean, it felt like that was when the momentum turned, and all of a sudden it's 17-14, and you felt like Seattle might blow that early lead. But a ton of credit to the Seahawks defense for stepping up, and then Geno Smith, tacking on another touchdown before the half. And yet again, I mean, that defense, first 4 drives for the San Diego. Wow, I do this every week for the LA Chargers in the second half. Punt, out on downs, and they tacked on a touchdown late, but by that point the game was basically over. Props to the Seattle offense for bouncing back 37 points this week, but I really felt like this was a game where their defense ended up winning it for them.
Absolutely. Herbert had the pick early on, and that was a key play. They lost Mike Williams late. They got the bye week. They barely used Keenan Allen. He was on the field, but 2 catches for 11 yards, 2 targets only. It was just, it was Eckler just getting fed. They weren't able to run the ball very well in this one, 15 for 53. And I think that they're lacking a little bit of balance. This is also a function of them not having their left tackle Slater for the season.
Yep.
They did get Corey Linsley back. That helped a little bit, but still Herbert was under a lot of pressure, sacked 3 times, a lot of pressures otherwise. I think that was a big part of it there. And just kudos to Seattle. We'll see. The news on DK Metcalf was, I saw a report saying that they phrased it as, we got good news. Now, keep in mind, this is Pete Sunshine Carroll, where no news is, almost, unless the guy is out for the season, it's always good news, it seems like. So keep that in mind, but he will not need surgery. Hurt his patellar tendon some.
Yeah, from what I've read this morning, it sounds like they're hoping that he doesn't need surgery, as in the initial course of action is we're going to let this thing heal, and hopefully a few weeks from now, he's back to the point where we can get him back out there. But reading between the lines, I felt like, there's still a chance that if, after a week or two, he's not making the progress that they're hoping, that surgery could still be an option. So in the short term, a pretty big blow for Seattle. I mean, Metcalf had been really, really good for them. But, he has 1 catch for 12 yards in this game, and you still put up 37 points. So I think you have to be pretty encouraged by someone like Marquise Goodwin stepping up. I mean, it was another solid day for Will Dissly, who just found his way, 4 catches, 45 yards.
Your guy.
It seems like you're not excited about it, but he's finding ways to avoid giving you a complete 0.
Yeah.
And it was another solid day for Lockett as well. And it's whenever it's 3rd and 7 and they need a first down, all of a sudden there's Colby Parkinson ripping off, a 28-yard catch. They've had guys step up time and time again. And we've barely talked about Kenneth Walker, who just is a monster. I think with Breece Hall going down, if you could bet Kenneth Walker for offensive rookie of the year, I like the direction that he's trending. 23 for 168. I had another long one to essentially seal this game late. I mean, he is a tough guy to bring down. He actually kind of reminds me of Dameon Pierce in a lot of ways, but he's in a much better situation. Yeah.
Which reminds me, I wonder what the odds are for that now, for offensive rookie of the year. But at any rate, we could take a look at some live odds while we're looking at that. I'll let you. I'm looking that up right now, trying to find it at least. We'll see. But yeah, God, sorry. I'm multitasking and not very well, so I'll keep on moving on that one there. But anywho. One last game to review. Seahawks, by the way, they get home game against the Giants next week, and the Chargers are off, and they desperately need that week off.
Yes.
Miami hosting Pittsburgh. It was a tale of one first quarter and then a dreary following 3 quarters.
Yeah, coming out of this game, your first quarter, you're like, Miami might win this game 49-3. I mean, they were rolling offensively. I was a little skeptical of how Tua would look, if he was rusty at all. Did not look rusty on the first drive. Even the second drive, which they ended up being held to a field goal. I mean, they were ripping off big plays left and right. Guys were wide open in the middle of the field. But after that, it stalled very, very quickly. And, Miami ends up punting or they either went out on downs or punted on 6 or 7 straight drives in the second half, did not score a single point in the second half, really was never even close to scoring. So it was one of those stories where it kind of reminded me of that Denver Chargers game from a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, all right, is this going to be the drive where one team could take control? And, for a while there, we traded like 9 consecutive punts. Essentially the entire third quarter into the early fourth quarter was just 3-and-out punts by both teams back and forth. And I mean, Pittsburgh had so many chances to take control of this game. The defense played really well in the second half, and they put together 2 double-digit play drives back to back at the end of this game, both of which ended in Kenny Pickett interceptions.
Yeah. And that, he threw 3 total. He threw 44 times. I mean, it's pretty diminishing returns. And then you can see why, his odds on offensive rookie of the year have taken a tumble. He is the leading quarterback, and he's 2,000, he's at plus 2,000 here. So Kenneth Walker is the odds on favorite now at 200. Dameon Pierce is at 300, Olave at 900, Brian Robinson, Wan'Dale Robinson is 5th on the board. And then there's a big group of players at 2,000, Drake London, Pacheco, Pickens, Pickett, Garrett Wilson. It's telling. There are no quarterbacks really that are strong favorites this year.
No, not surprising. I mean, Pickett feels like he's the only one who might even have a chance at this point, with guys like Ritter and, Malik Willis, being stuck behind guys who are playing okay at this point. So yeah, it's normally, you have a quarterback who just by virtue of starting like 16 or 17 games puts up enough numbers to win this award. But like I said, with Breece Hall going down, going to be really interesting the rest of the way. What did you make of Pickett in this game overall? I mean, finishes with 3 more picks, did have a touchdown, got to 257 yards. I thought he did a good job of kind of scrambling out a couple times, extending plays, but I don't know if I quite see it with him yet.
7 INTs already on the season, only 2 touchdown passes. It's going to be a tough year. I mean, these Steelers got the win at home last week, not because of Pickett, but he didn't hurt them before he got hurt. In fact, but it was instead Trubisky that rallied him to get that last touchdown against the Bucs. I don't know. I mean, this might be Mike Tomlin's first losing year.
It's starting to look that way. That's for sure. I mean, these are the type of games that you're used to Mike Tomlin finding a way to win. You have this many chances. Like certainly last year, like as bad as Ben Roethlisberger was, like I feel like the Steelers score 1 time in the second half, and find a way to win this game 17-16. But I mean, like they literally punted on 5 straight possessions and then threw 2 more picks. Those are your 7 possessions in the second half. So that's life with the rookie quarterback. They're at the Eagles next week. That's not going to be easy. After that, Saints, Bengals, Colts, Falcons, Ravens. They do play the Panthers late in the year, but other than that, you get the Browns in week 18. That'll be a Deshaun Watson game. There's not really any obvious, kind of gimme spots for the Steelers. And that's just kind of the story of the league this year. There's very few gimmies on anybody's schedule.
That's right. That's 100% right. They could be an interesting team at the trade deadline. Did they trade Claypool, for instance, there? I know his name has been bandied about. So that's a possibility there. Claypool wasn't as active as in previous weeks, still 5 for 41. Deontay Johnson, 5 for 42. You know what? It's the same theme here, though. They're not getting much downfield. I mean, Pickens got the touchdown. He's 6 for 61, had the 30-yarder. But, I mean, they don't have too many, deep balls again. It's a lot of checkdowns. And I guess that's kind of like you expect that, especially if you're trying to get a rookie quarterback to stop chucking it into coverage. But, I don't know. I don't know what their solution is on such short notice to turn it around.
Yeah, I mean, as it seems like most teams can do, like when you're in that, that late fourth quarter kind of scramble drill where you're just, you run it up to the line, you got to go as quickly as possible. Like then, of course, Pickett starts completing, ripping off these longer passes to guys like Freiermuth, Pickens, Claypool. They were all involved late in the game, but it was just too little too late and too much of kind of a panic situation for that offense that ultimately led to the 2 picks. Very interested to see what they do, though, with Claypool specifically. I think if you're a team like, the Green Bay Packers, I think you're glad to see Pittsburgh lose this game. Maybe that nudges them ever so slightly in favor of potentially being a seller.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. I don't think we'll have anybody suggest that the Packers try to call the Bengals up for T. Higgins this week, though. So I think
The Bengals are a bad team. They're desperately looking to offload T. Higgins for nothing.
For a year and a half down the road contract decision. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see any of that.
All right, let's rip through a couple of these questions before we sign off. Jackson says, after seeing a glimpse of CNC, would you trade Hill and Lenny for CMC and CD Lamb?
I don't think I would. No.
Really? I think I would.
I don't know if I would. I kind of want to hang on to Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, but I mean, you're getting CD Lamb. It's not like you're getting that big of a downgrade. In fact, CD Lamb was often taken ahead of Hill in drafts. I know it. That's if you were redrafting today, Hill goes before Lamb, but I think they're close enough in value. I don't know. I think I might, because I think Lenny might lose some carries eventually to Rachaad White, whereas CMC is going to just add to his workload eventually.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's just my thinking. Cameron says, waiver ability for running backs are super thin in my league. Any recommendations on who to? Oh, never mind. We'll move on from that one. It's too generic. Sorry, Cameron. You got to give it. Oh wait, I'm sorry. It's a two-parter, and this is the first part. Sorry, Cameron. Okay, current running backs: CMC, Saquon, Kareem Hunt, Hines, Madison. Was stashing Elijah Mitchell since the CMC trade. I've got 3 handcuffs. Who to cut? Cut Mitchell easily. I think that he's an easy cut. I think they traded for CMC because Mitchell's nowhere close. And I don't know who to try to pick up. I mean, I think Rachaad White's available. You pick him up. James Cook. I think I throw a shekel at him because I think he'll get the typical rookie after the bye week bump. And I think, they by them scratching Zach Moss before in their game against the Chiefs, that showed where their future lies in that team.
Yeah, I think you're on there. I mean, I like the idea of just targeting, running back at a productive offense. Like you said, with James Cook, there's potential for him to improve as the year goes along. I mean, I'm still holding like a lot of Kenneth Gainwell all over the place. I don't know how available he is, but just those offense where, you'll see 2 or 3 running backs get in the end zone in a given week. But I mean, you can't be disappointed with the current stable of backs that you have right there. If you got CMC and Saquon, you can't expect to have like, elite guys up and down the entire roster.
And Hunt's useful for bye weeks as well, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, do much worse.
I could cut Hines easily too if you needed the player there because well, I probably wouldn't cut Hines, but I'd keep Madison over Hines over Mitchell. That's how I'd rank the cut status there. You know what? We've got a great service called Ask an Expert on RotoWire, and we're not going to be able to rip through all these questions, especially these trade questions, but we have folks stationed ready to answer your questions and Ask an Expert. And you can check it out yourself just by going to rotowire.com/try. Strip away the paywall. It's no credit cards required. It's a free trial. Check us out. Hopefully you'll want to subscribe. rotowire.com/try. Get your credit card free trial there. We're going to sign off for today. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. As always, thanks to No House Advantage for their sponsorship of the podcast. We got Jake and Joe with you tomorrow to do free agents. So tune in for that. Have a great day.